The rules of early access have changed, and Pax Dei just laid off part of its team, and somehow that barely registers as news anymore. A studio walks into early access with a cinematic teaser, a janky prototype, and the kind of optimism usually reserved for cult leaders, and walks out 3 patches later with skeleton crews, investor damage control, and a Discord server where the only thing active is the bot that says, "Please be respectful." But Pax Dei isn't the first. It's just the latest to learn the new rules the hard way. In the year of our shattered roadmap, 2025, survival isn't about vision. It's about execution. You don't launch to ask for feedback anymore. You launch to prove you belong on someone's hard drive. Palworld did that with not Pokemon and rocket launchers. Schedule 1 did it with drugs and capitalism. Monstrum 2 didn't do it at all. And the only players who remember that game are the ones who reviewed it before it died. If you miss your shot now, it doesn't mean a comeback arc is coming, unless you pull a No Man's Sky and rebuild your game from the ashes of negative reviews over the course of several years. Most studios don't do that, because most studios can't afford to. Studios don't get time to recover from a failed early access launch anymore. They get forgotten. Let's remember a simpler time, when early access used to be a try before you buy system. Games launched a few days early to iron out last-minute bugs, tweak mechanics, and gather player feedback for easy quality of life changes. In other words, it was about polish, not first impressions. But today, it's all about first impressions. Devs get only one chance, and it's not the soft landing that it used to be. They drop onto Steam or Epic, and if the reviews are anything but glowing, they're finished. And I mean finished. A look at Nightingale, a beautiful concept, wild potential, but it launched with clunky combat, server issues, and empty worlds. Sure, they've been working on fixes and adding content. Sure, they've got passion and love for the project, but they don't have time, because the internet doesn't care about your passion. It's ruthless. As a side note, I absolutely wish Nightingale turns things around. It would make a fantastic MMO with co-op fights if there were enough people around to participate in them. In the modern gaming era, players are as quick to toss your game aside as they are to queue up a Reddit thread dissecting what went wrong. And when a game falters, it gets buried fast. Just ask the devs behind Monstrum 2. Monstrum 2 launched, then limped off the radar with nothing of substance to show. One shot, and it was gone. And that's a death sentence when your studio doesn't have the luxury of a No Man's Sky comeback story or Cyberpunk 2077's "We Fixed It" redemption arc. You might get your second chance if you make enough money on early access sales, but for most, it's game over the moment the initial buzz dies and gamers move on to more polished projects. So what does a surviving early access title look like? Well, it looks like Valheim, Rust, Hunt Showdown, and Schedule 1. These games launched in a state that felt good to play, even if incomplete. But they made it clear what the vision was. More importantly, each game had a complete gameplay loop or engaging system that their players put time into learning. The difference is obvious. These games were able to get better over time because players had a reason to keep coming back to it. And they keep coming back because they can feel the direction. That's the power of having a vision that works. When your game doesn't just look great, it plays great. People want to invest in it, even if it's rough around the edges. The problem with the minimum viable product is that it's exactly what it sounds like. Corporate jargon, a buzzword that gives studios permission to release a half-finished mess under the guise of early access. Originally, MVP meant creating the simplest version of a product that still provides value, a proof of concept to test ideas. In theory, it's about gathering player feedback to shape the final product. In practice, it's more like slapping together a woodshed and hoping no one notices the missing roof. Because here's the truth, most early access games don't prove anything, except that their devs were in way over their heads and bleeding cash. Instead of being minimally viable, they're just minimally functional. More half-baked concept than actual game, desperately begging for funding. It's like building a prototype car out of cardboard and wondering why no one cheered when it sputtered onto the starting line. You didn't bring something impressive, you brought a rolling disappointment. Take The Culling 2, a masterclass in how not to handle early access. After the relative success of the original game, the devs apparently decided instead of improving on the formula, they just chased trends like a dog chasing its own tail. They dropped the core mechanics that made the first game interesting and replaced them with a bare-bones battle royale that nobody asked for. On launch day, it peaked at 249 players. 2 days later, one lonely soul was still wandering around the empty map like a ghost in a deserted mall. Less than a week later, the devs pulled the plug, refunded everyone, and retreated back to the drawing board, probably hoping that we'd all forget this half-formed turd. Then there's VHS. This one could have been the next big asymmetrical horror hit. The survival gameplay was actually unique and fun, with engaging mechanics that made the survivors side feel like it had real potential. But the problem wasn't with the survivors. It was with the monster. Playing the villain didn't feel powerful or satisfying. It felt like being the underpowered prey, constantly outmatched by the survivors, who could easily gang up and win. And if an experienced monster faced inexperienced survivors, that was an absolute massacre. Balance wasn't just bad, it was a mythical dream. Players pointed this out loud and often, but instead of addressing the core imbalance, the devs pushed updates that felt like band-aid fixes, focusing on cosmetics and less impactful tweaks. As a result, the players who enjoyed being the monster just stopped queuing up. And when you've got one monster role and 4 survivor players, losing that monster player base meant the game's pulse would flatline. Survivors couldn't find matches, the Discord fell silent, and the game bled out. Like a once bustling neon-lit bar that's now just flickering lights and dusty memories of better days. The reality is that MVP doesn't mean good enough to release. It means barely functional. And players aren't dumb. They know when a game is trying to sell them on dreams instead of delivering legitimate early access gameplay. If your launch day experience makes players feel like they're buying a new phone and finding out that it doesn't make phone calls, people aren't going to stick around while you figure out how to make it work. An early access title isn't expected to be a final product, but it does give players a glimpse of the potential. An MVP, on the other hand, is just a sketch of an idea drawn on a cocktail napkin. If your early access game doesn't feel complete enough to be fun from day one, don't expect players to invest their time waiting for it to become something worth playing next week. That's the unforgiving reality of early access these days. Devs can't just slap early access on a barely coherent tech demo and expect people to pay to watch it slowly evolve into something playable. If your title feels like a frantic half-thought, it's already failed. And it won't just be forgotten, it'll be mocked, dragged through the muddy depths of Reddit, and left to rot like a half-eaten sandwich on the side of a dirt road. In other words, if your minimum viable product isn't already fun and engaging, it is not ready for early access. One of the most dangerous traps in early access is the mindset that devs can just patch their way to success. It's this idea that they can launch in a half-baked state, slap a work in progress sticker on it, and expect players to hang around while they figure out the rest. That might have worked back in the golden age of early access optimism, when players were willing to be a part of the journey. But now, devs are expected to show up on launch day dressed to kill, not wandering in like they just rolled out of bed wearing yesterday's ideas and a coffee-stained concept sketch in their hand. No one wants to watch a game grow up. They want it to show up ready to throw punches. The problem is, most studios don't get second chances. They can't just promise improvements and expect their player base to sit quietly in the lobby while they figure out how to actually make the game fun. Once that first impression is ruined, the comeback story is less epic redemption and more nobody cares. And let's be honest, those few that do make it back from a terrible launch are the exceptions, not the rule. Cyberpunk 2077 may have clawed its way back from the brink, but that's because it had a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign and The Witcher 3's reputation as a safety net. Most games don't get that luxury. Look at No Man's Sky. It took years of non-stop work to redeem its reputation, and even now, people still remember the backlash. The difference is that Hello Games didn't just patch the game, they continued to build it from the ashes of negative reviews, adding the content that should have been there in the first place for free. That's not a fix, it's a full reconstruction. Now, they've done such a good job with that game that people are actually excited for their next game, Light No Fire, a sentence that no one would have believed back in 2016. But here's the harsh truth. Most studios can't afford to do that. They don't have the budget, the time, or the player goodwill to pull off a No Man's Sky style comeback. Devs can't slap a bandage on a broken game and expect it to heal itself. If there isn't an engaging core system to keep players entertained, no amount of patches will magically make it fun. Players aren't sitting around while devs play catch up. They've already gone. Like they've got served a cold, bloody steak with a promise it'll cook itself while they chew. They've moved on to something that wasn't pretending to be mostly done while still bleeding on the plate. So if a studio's strategy is we'll fix it later, they're not just rolling the dice. They're basically betting the entire game on hope. And hope isn't a strategy. If they launch broken, they're signing up to be the next industry punchline. Early access used to be a sandbox for ideas, a place where developers could experiment, gather feedback, and build alongside their community. And to be fair, it still can be, but there's a catch. Players' expectations have changed. Now launching an EA title means putting your best foot forward, not just tossing out a bare-bones prototype, and hoping the community will forgive the flaws as you patch them out over weeks or months. The new rules are simple. Start with a solid core experience. 2. Make sure the gameplay is actually fun and engaging from day one. 3. Communicate openly and honestly about what players can expect from the beginning. The games like Palworld and Schedule 1 got this right. They didn't launch with a concept, they launched with a complete gameplay loop that was fun right from the start. Palworld leaned hard into the chaotic charm of Pokemon with guns, making sure the core gameplay was engaging even when it was rough around the edges. It didn't promise to be something it wasn't. It leaned into being ridiculous and fun. Schedule 1 also knew exactly what it wanted to be, a criminal life sim with kooky characters and addicting management systems. The systems were functional, the core gameplay loop was intact, and it was entertaining from day one. It could have easily turned into a take the money and run situation, but the solo developer is still at it, actively updating and engaging with the community rather than leaving players to wonder if they just funded a vacation for the guy. And then there's Valheim. It didn't launch as a perfect game, far from it. The low-res visuals weren't a result of lack of skill or funding. They were a deliberate artistic choice to create a distinct, charming aesthetic. Right from the start, the game knew what it wanted to be, and it promised to improve on that vision, which is why people stuck around. The gameplay loop, the explore, craft, survive was fully functional and genuinely fun. That clarity of vision made it stick. The difference is that these games didn't try to sell potential, they sold fun. They gave players something to latch onto right from the start, and that's why they kept their communities even when the rough patches hit. Players were part of the process, not just paying testers. Early access isn't a license to throw half-formed ideas into the world to fish for cash. It's an opportunity to build a game alongside your community while showing them something worth playing from the start. Players know when a game is just a tech demo in disguise. If your game can't hold up under the scrutiny of critical gamers from day one, then it's not ready for early access. Because in 2025, you don't get the luxury of a second first impression. If your game doesn't make people want to come back after their first session, it's dead on arrival. Players will just move on to something that feels complete, even if it's not perfect. So if devs aren't publishing a core experience that's ready for the harsh judgment of the community, they shouldn't bother going to early access at all. In the modern gaming world, you don't get points for trying, you get points for delivering. Early access isn't a free pass to experiment at the player's expense anymore. It shouldn't be crowdfunding disguised as a game release. It's a declaration that your game is already worth playing and spending time on, not something that might be fun someday. If you throw your games to the wolves, it better be meaty enough to keep them fed, because they are always hungry. Show up with a half-formed idea and they'll tear it apart, leave brutal reviews, and move on to something that's actually worth their time. And in 2025, that's just how it works. Early access isn't about potential, it's about proof. You don't get to stumble out of the gate and hope the community will wait while you figure it out. So do it right, or don't bother. If your early access title isn't already fun and engaging, it's not a game. It's just the next PAX Day waiting to happen. That's all for today. You're welcome.